Okay, hello and welcome to Crypto Underground. Hello, welcome. My name is Miko Matsumura, and I'm one of the co-founders of Crypto Underground. We are an event organization, and we meet in typically San Francisco. This is actually our first live streaming event post-COVID. Our previous event right before this one was actually with Hester Pierce, who is the commissioner of the SEC. And we've heard some wonderful news from Hester. She actually got nominated for a second term with the SEC. And we know that, she was actually due to be, at the end of her term. And she's obviously the crypto friendly regulator at the SEC. So we're very happy and proud to have had her on our program. So today, though, we actually have another very exciting leading thinker and leader in our space. So it's Jutta Steiner, who is CEO and founder of Parity Technologies. So that's I'm very excited about this. I think it's going to be a really exciting and great show today. So really happy to have her here. I think that. The moderator today will be Zoe, who is a co-organizer of Crypto Underground and part of our team. And so I'm really looking forward to having this chat between these two great thinkers in the space. And what I'd like to encourage the audience to do is we do have a live kind of a chat window. And I can see that there's already a little bit of chatting going on in there. So I'd like to encourage you to use the chat box to speak to one another as you do at a typical. So Crypto Underground hosts mostly live events in San Francisco. So I'm happy to have you guys chat with one another, do some networking. And you can even make potentially announcements, in the chat. But there's going to be a little bit of time for that. I think what I love to do as well is to have time for you guys to answer and ask questions of Dr. Steiner and of Zoe. So please use the chat for that. Typically what we do in a live event is we thank the venue, so we're using Crowdcast, so thanks for that. And we also typically serve drinks, so we apologize, there's no drinks today. It's pretty much just us. What I think I'd like to do now is I think Dr. Steiner didn't I think she needs to reconnect, it looks like. But what I'd like to do is maybe begin the process of introducing her a little bit, talking a bit about her background, talking about Parity and the organization, because I think Zoe has some words. So maybe you can start talking about who we have as our guest.
Great. Yeah, also very warm welcome from my side, everyone. Hello, and thank you for the great introduction, Miko. Very happy to host this Crypto Underground event here today on the Crowdcast platform, as Miko said, our first online edition. And yeah, great chatting going on. Just in addition to the chat you mentioned, Miko, if you have questions, please raise them in the Ask a Question box. So there is the chat and the Ask a Question box, because after the conversation, Jutta and I are going to have, which will be around 40 minutes, and there she is. That's great to have you back. We will, of course, open up the conversation and then use or raise the questions to Jutta collected in the Ask a Question box. So yeah, as Miko said, I'm co-organizer of Crypto Underground, but also a Polkadot ambassador. So I'm excited to combine these communities here today and really share knowledge and go over very specific topics with Jutta, our special guest today, such as Substrate, Polkadot, and the overall Web 3.0 movement. So we will go and explain a bit more what Parity especially does. But before that, I would like to introduce Jutta. And you have a very impressive and inspiring background. So very excited to have you here today. you are an applied mathematician by training. You also have worked as a consultant at McKinsey, but then also quite early started your own startups. Project Provenance, a London-based startup, is one of your initiatives, but also which focuses on supply chain, transfer to supply chain using blockchain technology. And you also advise several other blockchain startups focusing on energy, grid singularity. I read is also one startup. So yeah, a big portfolio. But before founding actually Parity, you were original chief of security at the Ethereum Foundation, where you have overseeing security audit and integration prior to the launch of the public blockchain in 2015. And now, since 2015, being the CEO of Parity Technologies. So it's a great journey, very impressive again. And to give the word over to you, it would be
Crazy
great.
journey.
Crazy, yeah. And we would love to hear more about this actually. So if you can elaborate a bit more on your journey and give a bit more details how this came, like really from the start as applied mathematician, then now CEO of Parity, and through your journey, how did you also find the motivation, or what is your daily motivation to build the decentralized web for the world?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. It's really nice to be connected with you all, even though it's not in person. But I guess that's sort of the situation that we're in. Yeah, I mean, how did this all come about? I mean, when I was at uni, I don't think I've ever thought about like starting a company or whatever. I really enjoyed solving problems with maths, primarily sciences, problems in the sciences. And but then like I also really loved like deep technical problems, but I got really upset with that it's still academia and like you don't do anything practical. So stayed even till I finished a postdoc and then left in 2011 or 12. Got into consulting, but then I moved to Berlin, and so I got really involved with the privacy community here, and thinking a lot more about like how the web works. I do remember there was just also like a sequence of like moments that I remember very vividly. Like I don't know, at McKinsey when we started to do research and whatnot, like we would use Google, and it's like that doesn't make sense. Like you're supposed to be confidential, but like we do all these things. Or first time I installed WhatsApp, I know like sharing the entire address book, boyfriends, everything with a company that I really don't know. And so I was I heard about Bitcoin for the first time like right around the Snowden revelations. So end of 2013, 13, I guess that was. And but then also I was like looking for sort of the state of the art privacy solutions at the time, how to share pictures or like whatever data I want to share with my friends, and accidentally came across Ethereum in that context. And so that's how I got involved. Met Gav here in Berlin, where he spoke at the Bitcoin meetup, and then Ethereum Foundation was looking for somebody, helping them to set up, as you said, like security audits and whatnot. And so my sort of background, both in business and maths, was quite helpful. And I really enjoyed the idea of like using maths to solve societal problems in a very constructive way, actually building. I always loved building. I don't know, maybe I should have become an engineer, but initially studied maths. But that's really what got me involved in this space, like this original proposition of building tech that can't be compromised, tech that's more in the hands of users, more truly aligned with open source. And yeah, and when Ethereum was launched and the foundation didn't have much money, Gav and I really still had the feeling that there's like lots more to be built. I mean, there was this vision of Web3 that he had started to build out, but quite frankly, like Ethereum was a prototype at the time, like very inspirational, but a prototype. And so we felt like we should really start something to continue building this out. And then I guess like I don't know. I mean, what motivates me here? Like I mean, it's still at the core of this. I mean, meanwhile, I have two small kids, and I guess I'm even more concerned about like the state of society. And And so it alternates a bit between just really being excited about a pretty powerful technology, and then really being quite depressed about the world, and like being able to contribute something meaningful in the way that we're doing it. So yeah, I think that's at the core what motivates me to do the work that I'm doing.
Amazing. Yeah, and that's also, I mean, you see this in the vision of Parity, right? In the company itself, really providing open source software to build the decentralized web. And you don't only provide the names you heard already, Substrate, Polkadot, also other projects, technologies you're building. Can you give a short overview on the technologies you're providing as of today with Parity technologies?
Sure. I mean, over time, we've contributed to a range of layer one protocols, as we call them these days. I guess that wasn't a term 2016, 15 when we started the company. So built a Bitcoin client at some point, Zcash, which was really interesting learning. And at the core, also like related to how we see the technology develop, like combining it with advanced cryptography, zero knowledge proofs, and whatnot. But then also some bigger project that we did, we never got into this proof of concept hype that happened in the 2014, 15, 16, but there were a few projects that we picked, one of them being work with the World Food Program, who leveraged some private chain implementation of what we've done. And that was really interesting to really get I mean, first of all, like to see in practice, like how this technology could help with cutting out costs and what it actually means to cut out the middleman. And then clearly also to see that it does indeed help and provides more open technologies that facilitate interactions that would have been difficult to establish beforehand, because people are political and want ownership over organizations tend to develop greediness and want ownership, and like an open protocol can help with longer term aligning incentives. So that was quite interesting learning, which also informed like how we think about Polkadot. So well, there's the technology side, but there's also sort of the more philosophical side. So how do you think about governance and whatnot, which got really informed by a lot of the practical things that we've gone through in the last few years.
Amazing. Yeah, and you have mentioned it already, Polkadot. Now we want to talk a bit about the shared protocol. It really enables blockchain to operate seamlessly together and at scale. This is also the vision of the Polkadot network. And congratulations, because the first phase of the Polkadot launch was actually 2 weeks ago. And the launch is divided into several phases, and this can be a whole discussion itself how this is how this looks. But a question here is actually, since I think also starting to start the second phase of the launch soon, what kind of challenges could or might come up during this launch process now? Maybe with also experience, you face Koh-Sama, which is another network which was used as a test for Polkadot. Can you share on these challenges a bit?
Sure. I mean, maybe I give a bit of like a little bit more detail on where we are. I mean, really the launch is like a long phase, like stretched over several months, and I guess already this shows how much more advanced what we're launching is compared to Ethereum back at the day. So started with Koh-Sama, like this canary network, real economics, to be able to test things that you can't test sort of on a conventional test network, where you can reset the network via a faucet. Like that was quite important. And then now we're in a phase. So 3 weeks ago, we launched Polkadot, which I think I should explain what that means. So we launched actually the first chain candidate, and that borrows language and terminology from open source. So a chain candidate, very similar to an open source project where you have a release candidate that you test before you push the final release. So in the end, if all goes well, we will have launched the Genesis block 3 weeks ago. If something fails in between, we might have to restart the chain, but so far it looks pretty good. I mean, that was the whole idea why we had Koh-Sama, to be able to get more comfortable with the process how to upgrade a chain, which is a really new concept that we've introduced. So we've had some difficulties in Koh-Sama with that, but we figured out how to do this in a how to do this going forward. So, and I mean, I guess there's like regulatory compliance that you always need to assure. That's like a lot more advanced these days than it used to be in the Ethereum times. And like just overall, I think the level of preparation that we've done now compared to back then is like an order of, I mean, it's hard to compare, but like, let's say an order of magnitude at least bigger, just because the technology has so much advanced and there are so many more components.
This sounds, yeah, it's still very exciting to go through the launch, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, you have mentioned what you worked on in the Ethereum Foundation, and also mentioned already a bit like Ethereum was the test, and now Polkadot. What were you personally the most exciting about when you and Gavin decide, okay, let's do something new, maybe something better than Ethereum? What was maybe one focus, or also several where you said, okay, this is what I really want to improve, and now we have the opportunity because we built Polkadot.
I mean, back when we started the company, so when we started Parity, or back then it was called ETHCore, we had a range of ideas. There was like building a proper, like building out like the new AOL, the new browser was one of them. Then building a platform for devs was the other one. That was all still Ethereum based. And then, but then it became pretty clear, okay, the first thing we need is a new implementation, because well, at some point you redo it from scratch, because it's just easier to do that than trying to optimize something that has accumulated debt over time, technological debt. But then I guess, I mean, we've always tried to be very pragmatic in our development approach, like aiming for substantial improvement, but not reaching too far, so to be able to also mitigate the technological risks and be able to deliver. Like that was always our approach, and I think quite in contrast to how Ethereum went along with, like, I mean, a lot of quite impressive research, but then not everything can be easily implemented, or there are a lot of changes, and then that slows you down. So I guess at some point it became clear to us that the way how we would approach solving the problem of making these things actually scalable on a time scale that works for developers, making it introducing, making it more flexible, making it more customizable, like all these things. So which eventually led up to well, we should just start our own new project, because we've a lot more ability to steer that in that pragmatic way that we always thought was the best way forward to enable people to continue building.
Very good.
And I guess, I mean, some of the things also that went into Polkadot, I guess, also came from like really hard learnings. There was the wallet hack that some people might have seen back then. So our thinking around like how governance should work, the need for upgradability, like a lot of things that nobody could have anticipated in 2015 or 14 went into this, drawing from the practical learnings that we've had in the last years.
Yeah, and through this also the framework, right? The Substrate framework came up, which is also built by Parity, and a very useful framework, and helps developers to build blockchains more easily, and also provides specific components. Can you elaborate on Substrate a bit more? What was the vision here, and what are maybe even some opinions, you know, that Substrate as a framework holds, to say, okay, this is what we really want to provide to the developer community?
That's a really good question. I mean, Substrate really came out as a tool for us in some ways, like having built like several protocol implementations, like initially Ethereum, then Bitcoin, then Zcash, then Polkadot. It was like, okay, there seems to be a pattern here. Why not abstract this into a framework? And so this is where Substrate came from. And when you look at the repository history, Substrate was initially called Polkadot, then renamed to Substrate, and then everything that was specific to Polkadot about building a blockchain was then pulled into the new Polkadot repository. So it really came from like eating our own dog food, and taking what we had and making a framework, and like through this also even getting a better understanding that like we thought where the innovation will happen will be through like flexible framework for building chains, not just on the smart contract level. So while initially you had sort of, there was the opportunity, like there was back then before Substrate Polkadot existed, there was the option of like, okay, you can build your own blockchain, takes years, takes a pretty deep tech team, or you can build smart contracts, but nothing in between. Like there was no flexibility, and that's sort of how then Substrate developed over time, like being that flexible framework to customize, and eventually once you've implemented the protocol that you think needs to exist, you can connect it seamlessly to Polkadot. Well, there's some things that went into it from as I mentioned earlier, like learnings, practical learnings from having supported public networks. Upgradability is one. WebAssembly, like that was sort of a crucial point in time also when it became clear, well, if this technology is going to be adopted, it will need to work with other standards on the web. So that's where WebAssembly came in. We did decide to standardize also on the networking level with libp2p to make everything more compatible with existing things. Light client first, just also again looking at what was happening on the networks, in particular Ethereum, the fact that apps always went through didn't come or didn't rely on like their own client information, but use centralized infrastructure to retrieve information. That was really something we wanted to overcome again by making it light client first. What else? Well, we stuck to Rust, which we had seen work very well in the context of client implementations when we did the Ethereum implementation. So another thing that we kept and thought it was a good decision. Even though it's not the fastest language to develop in it, it definitely helps all the tooling that it has. There's a bit of a principle. We favor convention over configuration, which just means to keep it simple. However, it's still always possible to extend it so that you can, even if the default, the convention isn't what you need, like you can always extend it. But making it easy in that way was one of the things that was important for Substrate.
Yeah, this gives a great overview, and really, I think the vision here to make it simpler and easier is something that Substrate really provides for the community, and that's the important thing generally about blockchain technology implementation, right? So, and this leads also somehow to a question it's more like an approach question, like as I said, it's still quite difficult to host your own nodes, to build an own blockchain and so on. But it's still required in some process steps. What approach is Parity taking here to face these kind of situations and process steps for the developer?
I mean, the light client first thing is definitely at the core, and that's then more akin to, I mean, many of you might use Signal. When you start up Signal, it also takes a couple seconds to synchronize, but it's not like several minutes or whatever. And we do think that with that approach, we can maintain a good trade-off between low trust and speed. So, yeah.
Good. Let's go a bit more into Polkadot again and see your to the position of Polkadot from your perspective. There are, I mean, a lot of currently red layer 1 chains where they work together. It's more like a cooperative environment. But do you really see like a competitor for Polkadot, or how do you position Polkadot also in the ecosystem?
Okay. I mean, I guess it highly depends how you look at this. I mean, are there competitors for very specific things that you want to do, like a token transfer between chains? Well, there's Cosmos, but there isn't a chain that is heterogeneous and sharded. Like, it's the first chain that now exists. And if you follow, I don't know, maybe Dan, if people really want to follow where we're at exactly, there's Basti's Twitter account. I tried to dig it out later. So we do have the first cross-chain message, trustless cross-chain message passing going. So the core technology that we need for chains to talk to each other. And they're like, it's the first chain that can practically do this on the test network. So yeah, I mean, I guess it depends. If you think like it's more useful to be only sharded, then there's Neum. There's what initially was Ethereum too, but now it also tends to go more into the thanks, Peter. Yeah, follow if you want to see what's going on with the current state of cross-chain message passing. Follow Basti. He'll do the up-to-date tweets. How far we are. So yeah, I think from that perspective, I don't see anyone being as far as we are with that. But then again, I mean, if you're a Bitcoin maximalist, like, we're not competing against Bitcoin, obviously. Like, that's a
yeah.
If you don't want to change, if you don't want innovation, then we're not competing on that.
No, I mean, you made it clear, you know, in specific areas, of course, but the overall package, you made a strong statement here. That's, yeah. No specific competitor as of now. What is like one, or your favorite use case, the biggest use case you see on Polkadot? Also, like, you can be visionized here, like looking into future.
Yeah, I think. Okay, so first of all, like, I mean, there are lots of projects using Polkadot already, like more than 100 plus companies and projects building for Polkadot. I think what's really interesting for me to see is how people will play or are playing with the degree of freedom they get through Substrate, like integrating, for example, in particular on the zero knowledge side, integrating proofs that before weren't feasible to execute on other chains because the complexity was just too high. So that's really interesting from what this really enables. And it reminds me of, like, when I look back at, like, in the Ethereum days, we had these cute, funny T-shirts printing money from home, and then there was like a 10-line LLL or Solidity smart contract for minting your own coin. And so I feel like we're like at a similar stage now, where if you look at Substrate and customizing, in this case, the runtime to whatever you want to do, like, that's a short script, and there's so many things you can do with it, and it's so easy, and like, but it's an entire chain, like an entire application. So that's really the exciting thing for me to see. I mean, when it comes to practical things, it's really cool to see that DeFi is also starting to take off on Polkadot. There's next week also, no, this week actually, on the 18th, there's a Polkadot DeFi day where a bunch of projects present their how far they've gotten with Substrate and Polkadot. So yeah, I think that's pretty fascinating. Actually, that now that we actually do have a technology that lets us start to create the things that we wanted to see exist.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jutta. And again, as you said, there are a lot of projects building already on Polkadot. And
yeah, I mean, if you want to check some out, maybe I don't.
Yeah. Peter,
Peter, I guess can post a few
Peter,
more.
here's your questions and send the answers. So that's great. So everyone, have a look at the chat so to find more information on these things. We received already a lot of questions in the Ask a Question box, so I might go over there in a bit. But I had one last question. If you if you can tell us or give us a sense, like, are there next projects coming for Parity? Like, what are the next visions? Besides Polkadot Substrate, which is very hot currently.
Yeah. I mean, like the very immediate things is to finish the roadmap that we've had for parachains, parathreads, all the cross-chain transactions, cross-chain messaging. Like that's on a roadmap and it will be rolled out. Like, I mean, so in terms of the launch, like hopefully switching to nominated proof of stake in the not too distant future, then a few further steps until decentralization, like on a timescale of like weeks to a couple of months, I would say. Then another governance vote to integrate the first version of parachains, then the bridges that will come into this, trustless transactions, some infrastructure parachains that we are going to provide or Web3 will provide, think storage, identity, computation to make things reusable for the projects. So that will be rolled out, I guess, over 2020 on the more sort of 2 to 3 year timescale, making Polkadot fully scalable, with making it hierarchical parachain relay chains of relay chains. And then, I don't know, beyond that, 5 to 10 years, we see, I think we'll have like a pretty strong platform within 2 to 3 years. I'm curious to see what will happen in that time. I think, like, given how fast this all has been happening and developing, I mean, it's hard to make a prediction beyond 5 years. Like the main thing that we've tried to do is building a platform that stays flexible, adaptable, upgradable over time, so people can rely on what they have to rely in order to be able to stay flexible and be agile.
Yeah, I think that's really the point here, as you say, to stay agile and flexible and really react also on the needs on the market. So, but it's definitely exciting to hear what's coming next in the short term, and then the long run. We have to see. So, great. Jutta, I would like.
But on a high level, I think I would be hopeful that it becomes sort of a functioning United Nations of blockchain. And if, I don't know, like in the end, to me, the most important thing is that we do have alternatives that we can build on. Like, of course, it would be great. And I think Polkadot's in a good space to actually be one of the key players that people can use, key protocols. But like, to me, the most important thing is like that. And that's why I also love open source, like the fact that we work together on building alternatives.
Yeah, and competition in the market always shows that, I mean, it's a good sign, right? If new.
Oh yeah, competition is fun.
That's why I think it's great. I mean, now it's a special situation where Polkadot is the forerunner, but if then other networks coming out, it stays exciting. So that's always a good sign. Great. Yeah, Jutta, I would like to go and open up actually to the audience question.
Give me maybe 10 seconds so I switch on some light, otherwise it's going to become a bit dark, and get some water. Give me 10 seconds, but I can.
Of course, no worries.
Still speak.
No worries. Yeah, Jutta is in Berlin, so it's around 9:30 p.m. there, I guess. I'm here in Florida, so I have sunlight in my room. So, and I guess we have also international audience today, which is actually a great advantage of doing these events online now instead of in person, that we open up these platforms to the world.
Indeed.
Yeah. And again, the questions can be asked in the Ask a Question box. The nice thing, what a nice feature of Crowdcast provides is also you can vote the question. So you see, you can click and upvote a specific question. So I will start with the questions that I have the most votes from the audience. One question from Dennis.
How difficult is relationship with the regulator, huh?
Yes, right. You read it. I just read it to everyone. Jutta, how is relationship with regulators? Is Oh, it's jumped. Is it somewhat easy? Are central banks making your life difficult?
I mean, regulators aren't there to make your life easy. So that said, we've always tried to do our best to steer the project in a way where we are compliant with the regulation, to ensure that also projects that want to build on Polkadot are able to do that. That's one of the key concerns. But that's been, I mean, that's been a struggle because it's all local, like every country has their own and whatnot. But at the same time, it's also interesting to see some geographies taking a bit of a more progressive stance, I guess. I mean, Switzerland being one of them, but then also, and I think Hester was here last time, as I heard, like this safe harbor proposal. And if you look at it, you could almost get the impression it was written for Polkadot, or if it had existed at the time, like I think it would have made designing the sale and whatnot a lot easier. So it's going to be interesting to see how this develops. But so far, I mean, I have the conversations we've had with regulators were really positive. So therefore, I'm not concerned about the project, but it's still painful and it's costly because you need lawyers. So
yeah, better to join forces where possible, right? So
totally. I mean, that's really great to see. I mean, there are a lot of good initiatives, like industry initiatives, that make it easier. I mean, I think especially where I'm worried is if you start like that, this will become a barrier to entry and a burden for the smaller projects, or like the projects that start now, because you almost do need to have a lawyer from the start who can advise you that you don't do mistakes, and early mistakes can be really costly. So anybody who's considering starting a project in this space, like don't think you have to reinvent the wheel. Like take all the experience you can get from other projects. Most people are really happy to share what they did, whether they would do it again. There's like industry initiatives like Coin Center who are trying to lobby, trying to provide more industry experience to the politicians. So yeah, there's definitely, like, now these days, a lot more resources, but it's still a lot of ambiguity, which is frustrating.
Yeah, thank you for sharing also the advice for anyone who wants or needs to start to face situation with regulators.
Yeah, I think that advice is actually that advice is still even a bit more broad. It's like, I think if I ever did this again, the main thing would be like, wherever you can get advice or wherever you can get somebody to do something for you or take it on, just do it. There's like enough things you need to look after. Like any advice, any support you can get, just grab it immediately.
I think that's the great overall advice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jutta. So next question, also the highest vote for now. Jutta, how do you view the distinction between Parity and the Web3 Foundation? Dan raised this question. It's also great to hear, I guess, for the audience.
Yeah. So Web3 back then was set up with a very broad vision of supporting the stack of Web3 technologies. So there's Polkadot, but also others. It did execute the sale and is the entity that will launch or has launched the network. While Parity has always been very focused on the building of things. So that's the building out of Polkadot, but as I said, like also the other protocols like Bitcoin and Zcash. So yeah, that's the broad distinction between the two.
Okay. And I mean, yeah, the focus is on support or development is also different when on Web3 and Parity, right? So, okay, another question from
Dan. I mean,
Web3
very much acts also like as a foundation, like giving out funding to foster the entire Polkadot, or I mean, specifically the Polkadot, but also the more general Web3 environment. So yeah.
distinction, but also a hand in hand going, right? My last
totally.
My last webcast I gave for the Polkadot community was with Parity, Web3, and Polkadot. So it was also great for having the interaction. It's hand in hand, and support here definitely.
Yeah.
So another question from Dan we have here: as CEO of a company that prides itself on decentralization, of course, how do you approach the tricky task of setting a singular vision?
I mean, if you start with like all sorts of different visions, like it will be hard to get anywhere from the get-go. I think it's helpful for a project at the start to have that strong vision to align everyone. But like having a strong vision doesn't mean it's actually quite, I mean, to me, it's like this actually goes hand in hand. Like if people do not share a strong vision, they can't act independently on building this. I mean, you see that in the European Union, for example, which for a long time had a strong vision, and like each country was sort of doing things in their way. Like there was the central European legislation, but it got implemented in like different ways and in every jurisdiction, and like that's almost a prerequisite rather than a barrier to decentralization.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer to stay focused on with the vision, right?
Yeah.
And another question we have here from Simon: what are your thoughts around interoperability with Substrate blockchains and others such as Algorand and Ethereum 2.0?
I mean, in principle, Polkadot solves interoperability in two ways. Like for the native chains, there's the native interoperability with XMP, Spree, but otherwise, like a protocol that tries to be successful on that level wants to be interoperable with as many other chains. So there's the bridges that we're building, these two specifically. Sorry, yeah, ETH specifically.
Yeah. Okay, and also a bit more or parity related question: who's your target customer? Interesting. And what unique benefits are you aspiring to deliver? I assume this is parity related.
So we build tools for builders. So anybody who wants to build a meta protocol, an application, who really wants to solve for the end consumer, is or B2B would benefit from our technology. So that's the people that we're building for. I mean, we've done also end consumer things in the past, and it's potentially something we want to pick up again. But at this stage, we're highly focused on being an enabling platform, which means building tools for builders.
Great. Yeah, which you see already with the existing technologies, frameworks you're offering.
Yeah.
Okay, going forward further in the ask a question box. It's great to have really an engaging audience here. Question to Jutta: what do you think? How will look like the people's life after mass adoption of token economy?
That's an interesting question. So I'm not sure I actually understand when people say the token economy, whether this is like the main thing we're enabling. Like going back to what I mentioned earlier, the fact that we had these t-shirts, like to me, almost the token economy was like the first thing that this technology could do after Bitcoin with Ethereum and the smart contracts. But it goes wider, because with Polkadot and Substrate, you can actually build entire systems. And you see that with, like, I think stable coins, for example, are an early version, like where, well, okay, you can look at a stable coin also as a token, and there's like an underlying token for the governance potentially, but it's like the primary thing you're getting is not the token. The primary thing is you're getting a solution to a problem that you have, which is a stable coin that reflects or mimics or is pegged to a certain basket. And so this is really where I see things rather going to, like rethinking the systems that that people use and rely on, and how we can change their architecture to make them more or to not necessarily to make them more decentral, but to leverage the properties of decentralization, like harder to be compromised, clearer and more transparent governance, and all these things. So yeah. But that's, I mean, also like what I would hope these technologies enable, right? Like integration with zero knowledge proofs, that we do actually get, like, I don't know, private payment systems with selective disclosures and whatnot. Like that's the sort of stuff that I would like to see exist going forward. Oh, hello? Can't hear you. Hello? Can you hear
Great.
me?
Yeah, I unmuted myself. Yeah, I heard you and I replied. I said, thank you for sharing your thoughts on this question. Going forward in the questions from the audience here. It's interesting here also. What are the proven business models for blockchain projects is asked. You cannot simply cut off percentage of every transaction like traditional businesses do. Yeah, because nobody will respect it in a decentralized community. Can you elaborate on this?
Yeah, I mean, that I would say also, I guess, depends on really what your value proposition is. I mean, any business model, which is a bit of a, I don't know, a non-answer, will depend on what the value proposition is. I think it's not like a standard thing you can answer, but it's not clear that whether or not like this hypothesis of the thick protocol will ever come true is not really clear, especially with the meta protocols, but it should lead at least to an easier way for businesses to compete on whatever is available on a decentralized and open platform. So that's, I think, what the key distinction is.
Okay, I have to scroll through here a little bit, and
Dan's really active. Dan has so many questions.
yeah, that's true. We have another question regarding Koh-Sama. We mentioned it a little bit earlier in our conversation that Koh-Sama is seen as a test net. Also, the launch, or it was also a phased launch as it's done with Polkadot right now. But the question here is, how do you see the future of Koh-Sama? The person had heard that the plan is to connect it to Polkadot, and Koh-Sama can become a secondary relay chain. If this happens, will Koh-Sama lose its to break things and experiment part?
So if that happened, it might lose it. Like, I would hope it stays what it is, at least for some time. But then it's a wild thing, so you never know what happens to a wild thing. But I think it has a huge benefit with what it is, like being this experimental playground test bed. That's still a real chain. So projects that potentially initially don't have the capital can deploy parachain or use parathread features on Koh-Sama to be able to prove their business case. And in that way, it wouldn't be necessarily helpful if it was integrated within Polkadot. But it's up to the Koh-Sama community. I mean, they could vote to change that once that becomes possible. But I'm sure there will be some version of Koh-Sama because I do think it has an actual value proposition to builders in the community.
Great, and correct if I used the word testnet in earlier. Koh-Sama is not a testnet. Peter wrote it just with capital letters here. More as Jutta explained, but was seen also as a playground. You could say.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, we have. Oh, and I think now. Shortly disconnection. More questions from the audience. We have the next one. Is there even a vision, or what is your vision on of Parity with the relationship of the Ethereum community?
Oh, I mean, the Ethereum community, I guess, is also not that homogeneous anymore. I mean, I would hope that many in the Ethereum community will see the benefit of what we're building. I mean, if that's useful for them, I'm sure they will. I think the main thing I hope for, let's say, the Polkadot community is that it stays as open as it is right now. That's, I think, something we've seen happen over and over again with communities that like certain toxic things can start to happen. Like I just hope that the Polkadot community stays at its core what it is, i.e. focused on innovation, and therefore has a bit of a defense against that. That's what I would hope for the Polkadot community.
Good. Thank you for your answer on this. Let's go to more questions here from the audience. We have another question here. Do you see support in the future for topics like regulation from Parity, Web3 Foundation, aside the technical ecosystem, to develop the product landscape and increase adoption and quality?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, okay. Obviously, like we can't give legal advice, but I think anybody in the organization is happy to share their experience with what they've learned, how to deal with stuff like open source licensing. I mean, there's all sorts of things. I mean, I've mentioned that so many times in the organization. I wish more people within the organization also had time to write blog posts about these things, because I do think there's a lot that we've learned. But if there's a specific question, if you start a business or need help, like feel free in any case to reach out. Like more than happy to share what we've learned in the past, being on so many levels at the forefront of this space.
Great.
It's just that the problem is that things also change so fast. Like you write something up and then like, I don't know, next thing comes out, and yeah, but like I mean, I would love to see community discussions that aren't purely technical, because there's so much else that needs to be worked out alongside. I mean, we've spent internally so much time on various things around taxation and legal, and it would be a shame if like our suffering didn't benefit anybody else.
Yeah, sharing knowledge is always the best approach here. So
yeah.
Okay, we have another one regarding the ecosystem. Do you see ecosystem decisions aside the technical ones governed on Polkadot and Koh-Sama?
Well, I mean, I've always said that since the DAO happened, there's rarely a decision that's solely technical. If anything, like over time, a technical decision, because there's more and more players, will benefit one or the other person or one or the other entity more or less. And so I do think it's worth keeping this in mind when we start building out the governance system as a whole, because rarely will there ever be a decision, especially as time moves on, that is purely technical. And how do you deal with the fact that like some benefit, some don't, or like just marginally benefit?
Thank you. Yeah, I think this were the question I would ask you, Jutta. You have I think you can read the questions. Where are there specific questions you might want to answer from the other ones? Because yeah, 5 minutes.
Do you know
left.
Chinese language? I started to learn, which is actually fun. Once you get into it, it actually becomes interesting. But I'm nowhere close to conversational. But I think it's really interesting. I went to China for the first time last year. Should have gone much earlier. It's really interesting to see how fast things get adopted and developed in China. So and being able to get a bit more of a sense for the culture was, I think, one of the motivations behind starting to learn a bit of Chinese.
And as you said earlier, it's always good to have the people who are good in this.
Yeah.
So I guess Peter said you have an awesome Chinese community in China. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Spray nested relay chains, Spray this year, nested relay chains more like next year. Do you see Polkadot in e-commerce? I mean, I guess integration with exchanges is the first thing, and then we'll see how this goes on. The primary, I guess, retailers will probably like more the stable coins that get built on Polkadot or Koh-Sama.
The question was here for the audience, what the retailers can expect and what should they be prepared for, yeah.
Oh, I mean, today, I would wait maybe a little bit still to see how this all works out. I am not a retail expert, so I'm cautious with giving specific advice. But happy to have any conversation offline around this, like if there's specific things that you might find useful to know. Yeah.
The other. Okay. Yeah, if the other questions, I think we have answered
Have
all.
you picked up?
Yeah.
Have you picked up any new hobbies? Yeah. Oh, I'd be curious. Like, that's actually, I think, a question for everyone here. I'd be really curious to see what hobbies you've all picked up.
That's true. Yeah.
I've definitely gotten a lot more into cooking, and a proper vegetable garden on my balcony. But yeah, really curious. I still need inspiration. Like, we don't know. It's probably a second wave and maybe a third one. So I need more inspiration for that.
Workout was on my end and stretching because
Totally.
yeah,
Totally.
I thought this was yeah.
Oh, then yeah, of course.
Great. Yeah, this actually concludes our today's event. We have answered a lot of questions. Questions we had from the Crypto Underground team, a lot of questions from the audience, and thank you again everyone for joining in from around the world, I assume. Raising these questions and really yeah, taking time to understand more about Parity, what Parity is building on, Substrate, the framework, and Polkadot, and to get to know Jutta a bit better. And if you're interested in further events also from Crypto Underground, Miko said this in the introduction, we are actually as San Francisco based. Now, of course, doing all our events online. And I think Tegan, our leader from Crypto Underground, also posted a link into the chat if you want to follow our upcoming events. And we always have very great speakers about specific topics in the blockchain and crypto space. So thank you very much, Jutta, again. I leave it open to you if you want to leave the community with specific thoughts and maybe, yeah, a closing remark from your side.
Stay safe and healthy. I think that's, in any case, still the most important thing at the moment.
Very true. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Bye, everyone.